to the degree that you want something is the degree you're afraid of not having.
Yeah.
God, I wish I started when I was younger. I go, well, yeah, but you didn't. So shut the fuck up and let's
Right.
keep going.
Right.
Like, you can't.
Nobody changes until they change their energy. And when you change your energy, you change your life. Because it's not till then that it's really real.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is way worse than I thought. It's like, oh yeah, it's way, way worse than you thought.
Yeah.
But luckily, there's more to you than you think.
And here we are. How are you, mate?
Yeah, great to be here with you, man.
Yeah.
Really cool.
In South Africa, do you call each other mate?
That's more of an English thing and an Aussie thing, I think.
What do you guys say?
What do we say? There's
Dude?
There's brew, there's bra is a big
Bra.
one. Yeah. Brew is a big one.
Brew?
How you brew? Yeah. Hey, brew. Weirdly, China is quite a big one in South Africa. It's
You just call a random person.
Someone would be your China, which means they're your friend. Like, how you my China?
You mean like that in the porcelain sense, or like in the,
No one knows. Not. It's like no one knows.
sense?
It's not in the country sense or the porcelain sense. It's like it's like super random. Just my China is my friend. Hey, China.
That's
A
rad.
lot of people would call each other mfowethu, which is the Zulu term for brother.
Yeah.
So it's like a term of endearment. If you like rapping with someone who you have a relationship with, you say, "What are you in for? Hi, brother." You know.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, one of those.
That makes sense. South African, born and raised, probably one of the reasons. And you have a very interesting story, and you were telling some of that story, and it's a rather long story, but I think it's worthwhile to like give people a little bit of the history of how you became into this unique position. We were talking about this before, this unique position that you've arrived in through the various life paths that you've gone on, one of which is tracking lions, which is quite interesting. But there's other different tangents that have brought you there.
Yeah, I mean, inside the strange Venn diagram of the tracker. So I guess it begins with growing up in the wild eastern part of South Africa. And I grew up on a piece of land that my great-grandfather bought. And he bought it sight unseen after drinking too much gin. And it had been a bankrupt cattle farm. And he bought it because the cattle had failed for two reasons. One, it's a low rainfall area, and so it was marginal kind of terrain. And two, lions were eating the cattle, and he was a lion hunter, and he wanted to go and pit himself against those animals in that consciousness of that time, 1926.
A little high on gin. You want to fucking...
What's
What's the biggest beast around
what
here?
could go wrong, you know?
After you've won all the bar fights, you know?
Yeah, I mean...
The only thing left is to go after a lion.
Yeah, and actually so that was my great-grandfather. Then my grandfather had a belief that boys became men through wartime flying in wars. He was a pilot in the Second World War, or hunting lions. My father and uncle grew up hunting lions. My father claimed he's not a very good hunter, but they grew up, and that's what they did. And so this property was defunct. It was pretty run down. They would go there. They would go and live in mud huts. There was nothing going on there. And then in 1969, my grandfather died. And my father and uncle were left in the wake of this loss with all of the family advisors saying, you've got to get rid of that place where you used to go and hunt lions. You know, hunting lions is a bad idea to start with. That place is in the middle of nowhere. It's going to drain you. You've got to get rid of it. And my father stood up in the meeting, and from a place very deep inside of himself, he said, we're going to keep it. And the family advisors said, well, how do you plan to take care of your now widowed mother? And he said, we'll make it pay. And that's how my family got into the safari business. And what I've always been interested in is in that place inside of him that knew that that's what he was meant to do. And so these two young boys, my father and uncle, and then very soon after my father and mother met when they were like 15 and 16, they moved down there and started trying to get this place going. The 3 mud huts, 1 broken Land Rover, nothing going on. They would try and convince people to come and stay with them. They would get the odd guest. People would come down. You wouldn't see any animals. Most of the property was scrubland. and kind of nothing was going on, but word got out that there were some young kids out in the middle of nowhere that were enthusiastic about what they were doing. You would go there on safari, you wouldn't see any animals, but you'd have fun with these like vibrant young kids who lived in a caravan and make you sleep in a mud hut where it rained. They send you outside for shelter. It was rudimentary in the extreme. But the real enlightening moment in the story, and the one that really affected me, was into the midst of this arrived a man, sometimes in the way of chance of these stories. And this man was a man called Ken Tinley, and he was a guy who had dropped out of high school, but then been admitted to a biological sciences degree because he drew a picture of a moth with such intricate detail that the dean of the faculty said to him, "You're in." He had done a PhD, and during that time he had lived for about a year by himself in this wild part of Mozambique. And during that time he had something inside of him had shifted, and he had tapped into the essence of wilderness at a deeper level. He could feel landscape moving inside of him. He could feel the rivers moving in his body. He understood how the moisture moving through the soil informed the flora, and then how that informed the fauna and the animals. And when he looked at something, he saw the connections between everything. Mm-hmm. And he rolled up, and he was a kind of visionary, and he rolled up at the fire where my family was trying to get this thing going. And he said to them, if you want this place to work, you need to partner with the animals. You need to think of the land. So you need to partner with the land, think of the animals as your kin, and you need to bring the local people with you and invite them into the protection of this land. And he started to show them how to actively restore the land. He would take them out to these places where the scrubland had come up, and the scrubland comes up because when the rain falls, the rain would run off, and scrub comes up instead of grassland. And he showed them how to clear it and how to pack the scrub into these ravines where you were losing the moisture. And as they started to do this work, the grasslands started to return. And then animals started to appear on those grasslands. And there was this incredible sense that as they started to connect with the land was coming back to life in front of their eyes.
That's a really beautiful thing, even to start thinking about and this is something that you were telling at the campfire yesterday when we got to spend some time, is Ken saw the land not for what it was currently, which was arid, covered in scrub. It was a traumatized piece of land.
To me, he was a tracker, I see a tracker as someone who teaches himself to see through things and to see something in particular. And he saw this wild, beautiful place underneath the scrubland that wanted to come back to life. And I think, getting back to the beginning of the question, is that went into my psyche as a young child. I watched the wilderness be restored, and I saw a place coming back to life. And I didn't realize it at the time, but much later in my life, when I started working in the healing arts with people, that landscape was alive inside of me. And every person I met who was traumatized, and you would see, what you might call the patterns of defensive scrub overlaying the core of who they were. I would try and look through that to something more truthful. And I have come to believe, the core of what I'm interested in now is the restoration of wild places, but also our restoration. What brings us back to life? What brings us back to a more natural harmony?
Yeah, it's almost like that became a metaphor. And to really let people understand what traumatized the land is, and you can probably explain this better, but it was the overgrazing of the cattle.
Yes.
So like humans came, added too many cattle.
Yeah.
And then out of their own, probably greed, probably desire for more money, a disassociation with the connection to the land. So all those things, greed, disassociation,
commodity,
just,
using the land, and the land became traumatized in a way, and it started to respond.
Because it was overgrazed.
And when it's overgrazed, when the rain falls, instead of the rain going into the soil, it runs off. As it starts to run off, the scrub starts to come up. And it's this amazing thing that, the land that is traumatized cannot absorb the rainfall. Just like a person who's become traumatized in some way starts to be unavailable to what they actually need. Someone who's been badly abused, for example, what they need is connection and safety. And what is most unsafe is that connection. And so So all of that,
they want it so bad that when they get it, it's terrifying that they might lose it.
or is it safe to open to it?
Yeah.
And then if you do open to it, what if it goes away?
Exactly.
You know, so that was going on. That was a very big piece. Grew up then on the land in kind of with a family with a beautiful mission, but it was chaotic. You know, we were a little feral, and my parents were incredibly driven, and some of what it took to get this thing going, and some of the losses that they'd had, they just put into action. So I sometimes say that I grew up in a cult of doing. It was just intensity outward, and no one felt much. And the whole kind of modus operandi in South Africa, obviously, is a very difficult and complicated political place. You know, the whole modus operandi was don't feel too much, just move forward, just keep going. Everyone head down, keep going. And there's a great place for that. I mean, South Africans are hardy people as a result, but, you know, when all you've got is a hammer, everything's a nail. It got to a point where that doesn't work. So
may have yielded a Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, listen, it makes for a strong rugby nation. This is a total side story, but once there was, I heard about this cruise ship that was sinking, and the whole crew, the ship was on its side, and there were two South Africans in the band, and they were literally the pianist and the violinist, and they orchestrated the whole escape when everyone else got panicked. The sort of the pianist and the violinist were rappelling out across this like lilting ship and grabbing people and rappelling back to safety. It was so South African to me.
Yeah,
that's a side story. Yeah, but then got into safari guiding. But as a result of the way that I had grown up inside that kind of intensity, lots of encounters with what you might call the edge. There were parts of me that were quite frozen, and there were parts of me that I would say I was unable to feel in some ways.
Well, there was one thing that happened to you that I can really identify with is you guys got attacked through a series of litigation that had nothing to do with your fault. It was somebody it was almost like a hostile takeover.
Yeah.
You know, where people were trying to come, they recognized after you started restoring the land, after you started going from this kind of ragtag operation of some teenagers having fun, drinking gin, showing them animal every once in a while, to actually restoring the land, partnering with the land, all the wisdom that Ken had given you. Then another group came in and was like, oh, we want that shit. So if we just sue them enough, they'll be bankrupt. We'll be able to take it. And so you got to understand like the dark side of the world. Again, greed coming to do something wrong. And I think that hardens you in a certain way. You start to look at the world like, kind of fuck the world. Maybe you still love the animals, but people, like, fuck people.
Absolutely. And what had happened is, as you're saying, the land had come back to life and the land had become vibrant. And in fact, we had started to see this one female leopard very regularly. And that female leopard had cubs. And she started to allow herself, and then the cubs started to allow themselves to be seen. And so word got out all over the world that there was a place where you could go and see wild leopards. And the presence of that cat there, that like most mystical of cats that was allowing itself to be seen, became this incredible allure, and people started to come. And people, I'm always amazed at what flows towards a healing, what flows towards a restoration. Just naturally, people started to feel pulled to it. And it started to become successful. The safari operation really started to go. And then we ran into this darkness, which was just an absolute hostile raid. It was people just trying to financially run us off our feet with bullshit suits so that they could take the land. And so for 10 years as a family, we fought that. And we had no experience in that world. We had no experience with litigation, which, you know, for the people who've been involved in it, is totally its own world. But for me, it landed me exactly where you're describing. I didn't want anything to do with this world. Out there in nature, things were honest. Out there in nature, I could understand that. But to actually engage in the world, I was totally shut down. And into the midst of that feeling of being absolutely shut down, I was working as a safari guide, and a buddy of mine told me that there was a guest coming, this woman who he had taken on safari before, and he liked her because she had taught him some martial arts. I had an interest in martial arts. I went into this room where the guides were assigned to certain guests who were coming on safari. And she'd been assigned to some other guide. and I wiped his name off and I put my name down, just like one of those. And it, again, like out of total impulse from somewhere inside myself, put my name down. And I met this woman and immediately we connected. One of the first things she said to me is that she said, I believe the restoration of the planet will come out of a shift in human consciousness. And I felt something in me go, that's my path, whatever that is. Meantime, I'm a beer drinking safari guide in, bar fighting safari guide in South Africa.
Which is
It's
probably
like,
one of the reasons why you wanted to learn martial arts.
Yeah,
Just to make your bar fighting
a little better.
a little better.
Won most of my fights by 100 yards. No, I mean, so I met her and took her out, felt a connection with her. And then on the third or fourth day, she said to me, I can see that you're frozen. I can see that you're stuck. I'm here for you. And I was like, she said it to me, I could feel these structures inside of myself, these defensive structures starting to kind of crumble. And she just looked at me and she kept looking at me and she said, I'm here you can talk to me. And just like feeling seen like that is this incredible, when that wash of vulnerability comes on you, like, oh, I don't know how this goes. But I broke and she really caught me. And she started to teach me how to heal.
Tell us what you said. When she really opened that door for you, because I think that's a really powerful thing.
Yeah. I mean, 10 years of litigation, attacked by a crocodile, tied up, attacked by people, there'd been a lot of stuff that had traumatized me. And when she said that to me...
We might need to footnote those and go back to them.
Okay, we can go back to some of that. But,
You can't just drop attacked by a crocodile and then leave people hanging forever. We got to eventually make a note to
tie back to that.
Yeah.
She said to me, I'm here for you. I started to cry. I was standing there with my rifle next to my safari truck, just started to cry. She grabbed me and I looked at her and I said, I don't give a fuck about anything. And she said, I know. And then she just hugged me. And that was the beginning of my journey. That was my first movement into initiating into the healing path, into the path of restoration, inner human restoration. And from that moment on, I started to heal. She started to teach me how to go inward and feel again, how to move towards what felt good, how to come back to life. And the strange thing that happened is I had grown up tracking animals. I had grown up, in the art form of how you follow an animal across the land. And as I started to heal, what tracking was started to change for me. And I started to realize that everything I had learned tracking out here, how you follow, the process of getting in touch with your medicine, getting in touch with your healing, getting in touch with your gift. One of the things I say in the book is there's nothing more healing than finding your gift and sharing it. That's another kind of tracking. And all of the processes of the tracker can teach you how to go inward. And so that was the Venn diagram, the restoration of the land, my own healing of trauma, and then what tracking was, and this art form that I had grown up with starting to change and become something totally different to me. And where those kind of three strange things came together, the purpose and the sort of direction of my life started to form.
Yeah. And the purpose of the tracking, so I think a lot of people start tracking because they want to kill.
Yeah.
Right? Like so your old family, they grew up as hunters.
Yeah.
Now your current family and everybody running Landalozi, it's all about preservation, conservation.
Absolutely.
It's about finding the animals and helping provide an environment that's as nourishing for them to thrive as possible. So you're still tracking, but you're tracking with the outcome being a sense of like kinship with the animals rather than I'm going to take this as a trophy for my ego.
Totally. And part of what made us unique is we were working with the Shangaan trackers. I think the Shangaan trackers are the best trackers in the world. And every day we would go out and we would follow and we would be in this art form. And then we would find animals where no one else would find them. It's not like you drive along on the road, oh, here's some lions. We would follow them into deep thickets. We would follow them into all kinds of terrain. And we would find them where they otherwise wouldn't have been found. And then we would call in their position and people would be able to drive their safari truck in there and get an opportunity to have an encounter with those animals. And one of them that I talk about in the book is, eventually when we find the lions, people come in to see them and we're standing a distance away because when you're on foot, the lions are a little bit uncomfortable with it. And you're watching through your binoculars as people from all over the world arrive and see a wild lion. and you see the presence of that animal going into them and affecting them. And so it's a strange thing, every morning when we go out tracking, we know as trackers that the success of our business, the employment of the local people, it all depends on our ability to go out and follow and find, and in that way, I like that the tracker makes a path for others. The tracker is the person who sets the direction in a lot of ways.
Same with the healer, right? Like same when you're healing yourself. You're tracking your own traumas, you're tracking your own shadows, you're tracking your own thing, and then those become the footprints that other people can follow to heal themselves.
Trauma healed becomes medicine.
Yeah.
And you have the map. The pieces that you've done, you have maps to those places.
And all the clues, all the clues of what to look for. Maybe they're footprints when you're actually tracking in the external. But what do those footprints look like on the internal?
And that's what started to happen to me. Like I just watched the trackers and I started to see all these dynamics. Like one of the first things that you see in trackers is trackers have a relationship with the unknown. They are not programmed towards security. Their whole inclination, when a lion roars somewhere out there, their inclination is to go without knowing. We don't know where that lion is exactly. We don't know where it's moving, but we're going to go without any certainty to go look for a 400-pound serial killer that can run the 100 meters in 4 seconds. And that's a kind of aliveness, the willingness to go without knowing. And you think about, we live in a society that is so obsessed with security. And I've coached hundreds of people now who tell me, when I absolutely know what the next thing is, then I'll make a move. It's like towards the track inside yourself, towards your authentic path. It's gonna be about beginning without having any kind of certainty. The willingness to start without knowing is going to be key.
Or the first just little track.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think one of the cool things, and as you get better, you'll have a better idea of like which way to go into the unknown. So it's still the unknown. Like the story you told about Renius hitting like a pretend golf shot when he heard a lion roar is like cool because it's like, you're all right. You're going to make a good guess here.
Yeah. It's like getting a sense of where that lion roared.
Yeah. So tell how he does it and tell who Renius is, because that's a cool story.
So Renius Jampachas Matanjana Mhlongo was born under a tree south of the property where I grew up. And him and the other character in the book, Alex van den Heefer, are two of the best trackers in the world. And in fact, they worked as a safari guide team, and Renius taught Alex tracking for 17 years. Renius is the master. He grew up hunting and gathering. This is a guy whose primary way of getting meat as a child was to track lions and then with his brothers run in, chase the lions off the kill long enough to cut themselves some meat. He's just a wizard in the wilderness. He's the guy who can hear the call of a honey guide and follow the bird. The bird will lead you to a beehive and then he'll rob the beehive. This is a guy who speaks squirrel. I can tell you, this is a guy who has incredible levels of bird language. Like, this is a guy who will tell you the difference between birds alarming at an owl or birds alarming at a python. He's the man out there, he's the absolute man. And so he was my primary mentor in that space, him and Alex. And the day spent in the book is a day spent with him. Where was the original question?
Well, the original question was, you guys wake in the pre-dawn hours.
Yeah.
And then you hear a lion roar, and he somehow watched on TV people hitting golf shots. And then he does that.
He does this weird motion, yeah. And what he's doing is the lion is roaring out there in the wilderness, and he's throwing his attention out, and he's trying to drop, if you can imagine, like dropping a stone. And that's why he liked the golf thing. He's dropping a stone on where he thinks that lion's roaring. He's gauging by the sound. He's gauging by the baritone, or immediately he's tuning into information. He's getting a sense of where he knows lions like to lie based on his experience. And then he says to us, somewhere around Lex's Pan, which is a waterhole that we know that we've named, somewhere around there, that's where we should start. He's giving himself something to aim at, and there's no certainty in it, but he's giving himself a general direction. Mm-hmm. And then we go there, drive the safari truck out there, we get off, we start walking around in big circles. There's a myriad of information laid down on the land. There's tracks of where impala have come down to drink. There's tracks of where a warthog has run away. You can see the tracks of a giraffe. And amongst all of that information, he's trying to pick his track. And in fact, trackers have this thing, they call it developing track awareness. And one of the things that he used to do with me when I was a kid is he would take me to a game path and he would say to me, walk down this game path and tell me what you see. You walk down the path, you come back, you say, I see the tracks of a herd of impala. He would say, I'm fine. Famba uya lang foot. Young boy, go look again. And I'd go back down the path and I'd come back and I'd say, okay, now I can see where a leopard has walked down the path. I can see where an owl's wing touched it. And he keeps sending you back. And each time you go down the path, it's like you're getting more information out of it. And that idea of there's information there, but you have to teach yourself to see it, that became absolutely critical to me. So you got to go without knowing. And then slowly you have to teach yourself to see your track. You have to start tuning into something very specific to you. And no one can tell you what your track will be. That is just going to come out of attention towards towards a different set of metrics inside of yourself. And one of the primary ones will be the somatic expansion, just things that make you feel like you want to lean forward, things that make you feel open. There's something in you that's going to be essential there. Noticing the things you're curious about are going to give you a direction to your track awareness. Noticing things that make you forget about time, noticing things that when you're doing them, there's no need to eat or drink. Those sort of things that engage you will be essential to you in some ways. But you have to develop your track awareness. And then you'll start to need first tracks. So this is how it started to come to me as a 23-year-old, thinking about healing. Like, okay, what's the first track? With the first track with trackers, it's like, this lion has walked here somewhere in a wilderness about the size of Switzerland. He's on the move. He's on the move fast. Lions will walk you off their feet. They move, So how are we going to catch up with him? Like, he could have gone anywhere here. And you'll watch the tracker just get the first track, and then the next first track, and then the next first track, and then the next first track. And the goal, and this may be the most important lesson ever for me, is to continuously dial down the infinite possibilities, and maybe one that I've battled with the most, because my inclination was to be able to see the vision, but it was hard for me sometimes to get the first action step and realize that sometimes the first action step is going to be miles away from what the vision could be. So I had to work hard on the first track. What's the next tiniest thing we can do towards where we want to go? What's the next smallest step we can take? The next smallest step we can take. And that's where Renius was just phenomenal. And I've also been thinking a lot about track selection. Like, when he goes out there, he has an amazing capacity to look at a track and gauge, this is going to be difficult. But he's realistic enough with himself to really push himself, to say, this lion walked here a long time ago, but I think we can get it. And one of the things he always says in the book is, he shatikuma, we will get. Like, this lion walked here a long time ago, but I believe we can get this. And yet he's realistic enough to know, like, this track is too old, we're not going to go for it. And I'm super interested in, at the moment, also because maybe where I'm at in my life, of the dynamic between reaching beyond what is comfortable, and yet also being realistic enough to say, like, we can get there. It's going to be a huge push, but it's doable, not as opposed to just being kind of inane about it. Just getting that balance right between the reach, the push, the reach and the push, and what's real in some ways.
And also the flexibility to adjust and also persevere, right? Because halfway through, you could go 6 hours in, and instead of we will get, it might be like, we ain't going to get it.
Well, it sometimes happen, you're on the track of a rhino that you've been tracking for 2 hours, and you thought it was fresh. It can be deceptive. And then you see the track of a genet cat, which is this nocturnal cat we get out there, in the middle of the rhino track. And this rhino walked at midnight sometime, and he's got 6 or 7 hours on us, and then it's part of it is being in touch enough to say, this is not worth continuing to follow.
Right.
Like, that dynamic in life, like, where do you hold on and push, and where is the lesson to hold on and push, and where is the lesson to let go? And how do you be in touch enough with yourself to know where those moments are?
Well, I think you got to go until you know.
You go until you know.
You go until you fucking know.
Yeah.
You go until you see that one mark, and then to not be so stubborn to ignore it and come up with some other reason. maybe a series of beetles landed and it looks like this footprint that we saw. Let's keep fucking going. As we're able to trick ourselves if we want something too bad and if we're too outcome dependent and we're not just actually willing to read the signs as they are, like accept reality as it is instead of trying to put our own ideas upon that reality and stick to those. And
the whole dynamic inside of tracking is dynamic, including like an incredible willingness to just try things. One of the things we talk about in the book too is if you go tracking, if you go out to find a lion or to find a life that feels more alive to you, 100% you're going to set off on that journey and you are going to lose the track. That's a part of tracking. And it's important to know that, because if you've let go of the safety of the known and you've gone out to seek something that is unknown and yet you feel called to, when you lose the track, it can be so terrifying if you don't know that losing the track is part of it. They can just be like, fuck this. I knew what was going on back there. I think I'll just head back there. But to know that you will lose the track, that is part of it. And then the trackers will go back to where they were last on track 100%. So you might ask yourself, when was the last time in my life that I felt absolutely on track? What was I doing? And when I've asked this question to people, sometimes in their 50s, they'll say something like, in my third year of college, I was doing this and this and this with these people. And that was the last time I felt totally on track. So you can ask yourself, when was the last time I was totally on track in my life? What was I doing? Who was I with? The other thing that they do when they lose the track is they just start trying things, which is so freaking counterintuitive to a school system in this culture that will have at all costs, and where that relies on absolute certainty in which Tracker loses the track, they just start trying things. They check a bit of open ground up ahead there, start listening to animals alarming, cut down onto a game path, walk a big half moon, and don't find the track. They call that the path of not here. Anywhere where you're not finding the track is helping you refine. People really understand that one because people have spent a lot of time in the path of not here. But anywhere
the path of not here takes earnest. It takes, you really have to look to know that it's not here.
But it's part of the path. And it's refining down where that animal did go. Okay, he didn't go here. He didn't go here. And that's starting to help you refine in.
Yeah. I did a lot of path of not here.
I
still do path of not here. I think we probably will forever, right?
Yeah, and if you're gonna make up your own life, if you're gonna make up your own life, and that is what the tracker does. The tracker doesn't look at what the culture has to offer and say, "Oh, I'm that. I'm a this. I'm a this." They make up a part that is supportive to what they uniquely have to offer. And if you're going to do that, you're going to spend a lot of time on the path of not here.
And what's funny is people will use that. People will use all of your path of not here's as slights. They'll be like, yeah, remember when you tried that, bro? Remember when you made nail polish for men? That was a stupid idea, right? I was like, yeah, it was. That was the path of not here. I got it.
Yeah.
I recognize
we were
that wasn't a good business.
We were trying things.
And it's it didn't work, But you know what? Other things worked.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't have to have 100% fucking track record to figure out. Thank you. Thank you. I don't have to have that to be, to be qualified to do something else. Nobody has 100%.
Yeah. And good luck finding your own path if you're not willing to do that.
Yeah.
Sit in the unknown. Spend a lot of time, on the path of not here. But then something starts to emerge. You get back onto that track. It starts to pull you forward. You start to feel like being on the track is actually play. And to watch Alex and Renius move on that track, it's so dynamic, and you can watch them go into a kind of energy state. And it's like they can feel the lion moving up ahead of them. And they can tell subtly how it's vectoring through the bush. They're doing a lot of things. They're doing a lot of difficult things, and they're making it look easy. Their eye is catching the ground. They're vectoring off trees up ahead. They're getting a sense of how the lion's moving. Between the three of us, the track is passing seamlessly. If the lion cuts, I'll pick it up. If he moves back another way, Alex will pick it up. Communicating with hand signals with each other. If an impala alarms way up ahead of us, it grabs our attention. Birds, eagles, vultures, everything is talking to you. And there's this, inside of that, there's this incredible feeling of starting to be in flow with the animal, being in flow with the track, almost being in resonance. You can feel the movement of the animal through the track. the track will tell you the cadence that the animal is moving at. So you can see if a lion is moving fast. And then you balance your speed with the lion. And as you start to balance your speed with the lion, you can feel that lion moving up ahead of you. And it's like you're going into resonance with that very thing that you are seeking. And
It's
then
like the lion is your purpose to a certain degree.
the lion is pure aliveness,
It's
pure
aliveness,
purpose.
purpose. It's what you're here. It's what you're here to do, and to collapse that into like a singular purpose, tracking that thing.
And it should scare you a little bit. You should respect that thing up ahead there. You should.
It's probably nothing that's more terrifying.
You should desire to
than your
find
purpose.
it and be afraid of finding it and have enough courage to keep looking for it.
Yeah.
But there can be moments when you're tracking, the track will cut down into a riverbed and you can feel it's starting to get fresh. And you can actually feel like this.
Oh shit! I'm about to get
the
there.
lion's track is on top of the tracks of everything. Sometimes you'll see the lion's tracks on top of the tracks of an antelope, and then you see the antelope, and it means the lion has walked past you after the antelope that you're looking at 300 yards away. So you're starting to get very close. And then 200 yards ahead of you, a monkey starts alarming. Ew, 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 ew. And then 50 meters ahead of that, an inyala, which is a type of antelope, starts to alarm. And the tracks are telling you a story. You can feel the animal. The animals are talking to you, and you start to feel yourself go into an absolute flow. It's like everything is speaking to you. And in those moments, it's in the realms of the track and the tracker start to disappear. There's no trying in it. Your eye is catching the track. You can feel where the animal is moving. You're making great decisions as to where it cut. You're just getting confirmation as you go. The whole field is talking to you. And I've always thought that when you start to really line up with that lion that is calling you in your own life, and you start to really go into its resonance, and you start to really understand what it is, there is this feeling of life itself starts to guide you. You're not trying to create. You're not trying to make it happen. It's starting to show you. And that's where it gets interesting and hard to talk about. But the feeling that instead of you doing anything, you can feel what wants to happen. And because you're in harmony with what wants to happen, it's coming through you. It's coming towards you.
Yeah, it feels like a pull rather than a push. Like
magnetic.
At the start, it might be a push. Like you have some signals, you're pushing, you're walking the circles, you're looking. It's a very active process using your cognitive reasoning, deductive reasoning, your mind, your sight. You're pushing to try and find this, and you're beating the path, and the dedication to walk in these circles and keep looking. It's a push. But then once you get on the track, get a little closer, it's like the lion is pulling you towards it.
And you absolutely feel that shift in a track. And trackers by nature have a very energetic quality to them. They have a sense of that. Like you can feel they can sense energy. It's almost impossible to make Renius backtrack an animal. Like because the flow of energy on the track is like wrong for him. So occasionally he'll walk back, get a sense of where it came from. But if you said to him like, let's backtrack these animals for fun, he can't do it because the flow of energy is wrong. But once you get into that situation where everything is talking to you, it's absolutely magnetic and there's no trying in it. And inside of that, that's where tracking becomes like any kind of really deep practice where you go into state. It starts to teach you how to go into a state. Absolutely aware, attuned, and present inside of that.
And that's that key signal that you're on your way to your purpose. And I think there's another interesting metaphoric moment is sometimes when you confront your purpose there, it feels incredibly threatening. Just like the lion can sometimes, you'll come up upon it and it'll be a stare down and it'll be a moment. And I think you told some of these stories, but talk about that moment when you come face to face with a lion that's there and like what you need to do in that moment.
Lions are most dangerous on two occasions, but I must say that generally their number one modus operandi is to get away from you. That's like most of the time what a lion will do, like any great martial artist, is inside of an opportunity for contact or conflict, their inclination is to get away from you. They're dangerous on two occasions. The one is when they're on meat, and the second is when they have cubs. And obviously when you go out there every day, sometimes they can have had an interaction during the night also. Maybe they got into a fight with other lions. So sometimes you can run into something where a lion that you've tracked before got injured during the night, and that can also be very dangerous. Now, normally what will happen is the first thing that you hear, if you haven't seen the lion before he sees you, is you start to hear the growl. And that growl can ramp up in volume, from like a basic warning to like, I'm gonna fuck you up. And it sounds like someone started a dirt bike in the bush up ahead of you. You just hear, and then usually you'll see the lion. And the body language conveys to you with absolute certainty that you've now crossed the boundary. And one of the things that I love about nature is the animals are completely honest. They communicate with you in a non-verbal language. I think of it as a language of presence. But you will see that lion drop his head, the ears flatten, the whole body tightens, the teeth come up into a snarl and revealing these terrifying teeth, and the tail lashes. But the thing that really gets you is the look on its face. The look on its face is, you've come too close now, and it conveys this energy out of it. And then that's it saying, you're too close. Now, if you've already sort of crossed its boundary, then it stands up and it's hunched over, it keeps its head down, and it starts to walk towards you. And then that walk starts to get faster, and then it starts to bound. And when it comes at you, a big male, the mane will fly as it comes towards you, and the teeth are out and the tail is lashing. And at that moment, you feel something fundamentally old in your biology just absolutely go exponential. Your visual acuity goes through the roof. It's like you can see every hair on that lion's neck, the teeth, the whiskers, the look in the eyes. And often if you're with other trackers, you just grab a hold of each other. And in that moment, you have exactly one option, and that is to stand. And so, what we do is you try and condition yourself by running that scenario mentally through your head. Then if you track lions enough, you get charged enough. And so you start to get a little bit of experience in those moments. Drop your energy. I bend my knees a little bit. I breathe out to let my energy move downward. And then you stand, you meet the gaze. You might even take a step forward to push your energy forward towards the lion. And you stand, you start to shout. Hey, hey, hey. Sometimes you'll put your arms up. And 99.9% of the time, if you can meet that charge with your presence, that lion will stop.
You don't have like a special thing you say besides hey?
Well,
like...
my uncle always used to scream at animals in Afrikaans. He used to, which is one of the local languages down. He screamed, "Futsak, futsak." I don't know why he thought that was like the term that would help. Usually some expletives come out. Some language that is not good for podcasting, but it's
good for this podcast probably.
There was one occasion where a lion stopped so close. When we put the brakes on, sand flew into my mouth. And that's when you're having a fucking rough day when a lion throws this charging lion, puts sand in your mouth. But you got to stand. And it's an exercise in presence, and you are conveying a language to each other in those moments. It is directly telling you you've come too close, and you are conveying back that you are in fact dangerous. And you have to let that lion know with absolute certainty that you are dangerous, because he's got hundreds of years of being hunted on the plains in his biology by a shape that looks a lot like yours. And so, it asks you a lot about your courage. And, one of the things that I write about there is that I think one of the dangers of what we're living in now is a danger of no danger. Neuroses can be a substitute for real fear and suffering. But in that moment, it's such clean fear, and it activates you and it formats you. And it teaches you a language of presence, teaches you how to communicate without words.
I think there's a couple things that I want to talk about there. One is the honesty of nature, because people are so fucking dishonest with how they represent. Like, authenticity is very hard for a human, because I think of our social dynamics and the evolutionary biology of the tribe, the advantage of playing different roles and playing different things. You look at like Survivor, for example.
Yeah.
People are full of shit constantly on that, right? Like, and there's all these passive aggressive tendencies. Like, lions aren't passive aggressive. They're not going to be like, yeah, I don't really care about you, and then just turn around and like go to fuck you up, right? They're not playing games. They're not going to purr and then just turn on you.
No, and that's one of my like pet peeves is like all of these shows that you see on TV, it's like Death Week in nature, deadly creatures that'll eat you in nature. Everything is like pumped up to like these dangerous things in nature. Nature is honest. That lion, if you are getting charged by that lion, you've come too close. You've missed something. You've crossed a boundary, and now he is conveying to you where the boundaries are. But all the animals will communicate to you with their body language, and nothing just up and tries to kill you. They will tell you where the lines are. They will tell you where the boundaries are. And if you are sensitive and if you pay attention to the energy they're conveying to you, it is one of the safest environments in the world.
And if you're in control of your own energy.
Yeah.
Because if you freak out and run away instead of standing strong and shouting expletives and Afrikaans or whatever you need to do, like the lion will eat you asshole first.
Yeah.
Like
you got to get it right.
You got to get it right.
You got to get it right. And if you do, you're fine. And in fact, I lead retreats. I take people tracking, and we track lions on the retreats. And I'm 100% confident, working with Renias and Alex, that we are as safe doing that as you would be walking down the street somewhere, because we obey the rules. We're good at the tracking. We get the decisions right. We stay ahead of the safety, so we have the experience to know, like, it doesn't matter that you've come on a tracking experience. That terrain is not good for us to go into, so we're not going to go there. We make humble decisions, and in that way, nature will communicate with you 100%.
So the other thing I want to talk about and kind of veer into is how this applies to, because you studied with an indigenous healer, and the really beautiful thing about the healer that kind of aligned with you was that he had kind of a tracker's mentality. And in the way that he would track things that were happening in ceremony, because he was holding ceremonies, and you were in some ways like you were to Renius, an apprentice tracker, but you were an apprentice healer with him as well, and learning from him how he could read a room, how he could read someone. So talk a little bit about that, because I think there's so many crossovers between that path, and even if we go to the metaphor of that moment of standing in the face of your potential, which is the scariest thing. It's like we're not afraid of, like, the thing that we're most afraid of is how powerful we actually are. I forget who said that quote, but it's the truth. It's like, so when we're face to face with that lion, our potential, do we have the courage to hold, or are we going to run away from our true power? Like, all of these metaphors go in, but it also goes, what's really interesting, it goes all the way through the internal as well, as like through this same healing process. That which you learn externally, you also learned the same thing internally.
Yeah, and again, like this weird sort of Venn diagram that came together, and that I believe comes together when you start to do that work of finding your unique track in life. So yeah, I met him in a ceremony in California the first time, and I remember he walked into the room, and almost immediately what I saw as someone who had grown around trackers was a tracker. I could see by the way he looked around the room that he was seeing things in the room that other people weren't aware of. And he had a particular way of noticing. And in fact, in the first encounter that we had, there was a young girl in the group who'd been very terrified about coming to the group. And he walked in, and he had hugged everyone, and then he sat down and he looked at her, and he said, "I can see where you're holding it, and it's okay, I'll be with you. I'm going to be with you through all of this." And immediately, so I was aware that he was aware. And in a way, I felt like he was showing me, like, oh yeah, there's information here. But then, started to get into some of that work. To me, once the ceremony started, I was back home, because the pretense went out of the room and people became more natural. And that unspoken language that I'd grown up with. What's that?
They became honest.
They became honest.
People are honest as shit in ceremony.
And the language of presence. And it wasn't what they were saying. It's the language of presence. It's the way they were sitting. It's the way different groups would constellate. The way everything was moving. I understood what was happening in there through hours and hours of knowing how to read animal body language. And we're just animals. And so it was all there. And so in my first ceremony, I started to facilitate. I didn't even know that was what I was doing at the time. I started to create little moments of energy, little bits of facilitation, little little dynamics that open people up, that move things. And it just felt like, this is totally natural to me. But what was amazing about him is over a few years, I was just in ceremony, and then slowly our relationship started to deepen, and I started to understand the space more and more. And then he started to offer more to me. And I was interested as a tracker too, and I remember things like, everything to him was tracks, and then I started to see them. The tone of voice conveyed something, the look in the eyes, when you hugged someone, the texture of the body. I remember we went through a whole phase where he would catalog cries for me. When people would cry in ceremony, he would say, listen to the tone of that cry. That is very particular to someone who's been neglected. Listen to the tone of that. That is a cry of grief. That's loss of a parent at a young age. And so he was exceptional at imparting that, and then also awareness of the feeling in the room. The feeling was what almost primarily what he was tracking, and that became everything is like we can sit down and we can talk, but the real conversation that's happening between us is the feeling between us. And in fact, when I first said to him, I want to apprentice, and this was still when I was in my own healing process, he said, you're saying that, but you're not open. And I said to him, no, I am open. I want to learn from you. He said, you're suspicious of me. So when the suspicion goes, and it doesn't matter what you say to me, it's when the feeling is right between us. And that was really interesting to me. And then when I started apprenticing, and this is one of my favorite dialogues that happened between us, unspoken dialogues. Very early on, he created a code between us. So there was a time when he had his back to me, and I was watching him work with someone. And then he turned, and he looked at me, and he said, I wanted you to know that I felt your energy and your gaze on me. And then he turned away. And in that moment, he established a type of code. So then when we would work together, we would work in the energy. And there were some processes that I would approach, and he would close the energy, and it wasn't a process. It's something personal happening between him and someone. So I wasn't allowed to be, he didn't have to say it to me, he would close the energy. And then other times I would approach and he would leave it open, and I could come in and be a part of the facilitation. And then often when something was happening in a ceremony, I would catch it, and then I would look at him, and he would look at me to say, you caught it. And so all through, a 6-hour ceremony, he, at a moment where I caught something, he would just look at me with the look he had given me to say, yes, that's it. And that went on for years. Almost the entire mentorship was through shared presence. And some of what I realized through being with him and being with Renius is that, man, one of the great gifts of my life was to be mentored. And mentorship, my mentors never told me how to do anything. They just let me be with them. And inside of the masculine, I came to believe that the masculine experience of mentorship is through absorption. And literally the absorption of the presence of another man's body, in a way, being near their body and the way they move. There was like a current, a presence that moves there between you. And Renius never taught me how to track. He let me be near him while he tracked. And that's how it traveled. And from Alex to myself too. And then I was never...
So they teach by being.
I was never taught by teaching. I was only ever taught by being, by these men who came into my life.
It brings up a lot of memories for me, because I remember the first person I really considered a true friend, like someone who was like, oh, this is my brother. And also in some ways a mentor brother, like a big brother, but also a really dear friend was my friend Bodie Miller. And he was a fantastic athlete, Olympic skier. But we connected because I always felt like I could track, even in like the most ridiculous hedonistic party setting, I could track things. I could track when there was trouble starting. Like I've had a lot of friends who've gotten in street fights. Never once has that happened when I've been around, except for one random occurrence that happened so fast and I was by myself that there was no time to track it. It was just like we got ambushed.
You can feel it. Like in the bar, you can feel it 10 minutes before it starts.
I can see it. I can see where that is. I can see where the fun is. I can see when the energy of the night is dying. I could see all of the things. I can see when someone's too intoxicated. But nobody else around me could see that. So I felt alone. I felt really lonely. And then I met Bodie in Vegas, And it was one of those nights, and it's like 4 a.m. We start talking in the club. We have a lot of affinity in there, and we start noticing some things. But then we start going through the casino, and I'm tracking.
Yeah.
And we're all drunk, but like
awareness.
The awareness is there, and
Yeah.
I'm tracking. And then I'll look at him, and he'll like nod at me that he saw the same thing. And then he'll see something, and I'll have seen the same. And we just start noticing that we have the same kind of track awareness through this very human landscape. And that formed this bond of like, holy shit.
Well, you're in the second conversation with each other.
Yeah.
Not this one. You
Yeah.
know? And I mean, one of the things that we noticed early on teaching people to track was that people who had grown up in dangerous houses were instantly onto tracking, fast onto tracking. You know, they were like tuned in. So if you grew up in a dangerous house, you knew what night lay ahead of you by the sound of the door closing that evening. You could tell, like, oh, here it comes, or we're going to be all right.
Or like you said this yesterday, I think, or the sound of how the keys hit the table.
Yeah. You know, someone comes in, keys hit the table. All those little cues in the house have a feeling to them. And that is because if you had to keep yourself aware like that, you develop that kind of awareness, energetic awareness of the space. And the great trackers have that. And it translates. And in fact, we're all trackers. It's just a question of developing it.
And those pressures early on, actually, like you're saying, it's a great point. It exacerbates that because my childhood wasn't as brutal as many were, but my dad emotionally was so fickle that the subtlest thing that happened 2 days ago, the subtlest intonation of my voice, a joke that was taken wrong, would erupt in this angry rage that was quite traumatizing for me as a young boy.
Oh, that will develop your awareness incredibly.
Ooh, I was like sharp as shit. I knew how to read situations. I knew because I had to know when it was coming. I had to know what was causing it. Bodhi had a different situation in which he was just largely left to his own devices in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
It was like the parents had absolute trust for him to just kind of bang around from like 4 years old and figure shit out, climb a mountain, ski down it, come home when he wanted, like sort his shit out. So he was actually taught by nature and the dangers of the actual real world. So both of us were kind of taught to track in different ways and from different adversities and different challenges.
Yeah, and then that type of awareness, when you start doing healing work, becomes, trauma healed. Starts to become the medicine. Like that awareness becomes an absolute gift in that space.
Yeah, and another thing that you mentioned is about that unspoken consciousness that you can feel from somebody, and this is for some people this is already broaching into this woo-woo category. Because the one thing I'd like to say is the first thing that I think talking to you makes you realize is there's so many things that you may be noticing subconsciously that you may be ascribing to some ESP kind of sixth sense, but it's not a sixth sense. It's actually just the practiced awareness of intricacies of detail that you're not even aware of. They become like subconscious awareness.
I mean, if you walk into a ceremony, I bet you can do this, but if I walk into a gathering now, I've gone into enough ceremonial gatherings and worked with enough trauma that I can see what's in the room, to the point where like people would say to you, how did you know? How did you know that this is what happened to me? It may appear mystical, like you just knew, but it's like, it's all there, it's written. You teach yourself to see. You teach yourself to see the tracks. But, and I do think that there's like, the more you technically develop as a tracker, then it's technical into mystical.
And that's all right. So that's the next place exactly where I was going, because I was sitting in ceremony with Hamilton Souther, who is one of my great, shaman mentors. And I remember we're just one-on-one in ceremony together. And it was he was opening a dieta for me, which is a spiritual practice where you make a communion with a plant. And so it was a very focused thing. And I'm very grateful that he offered that to me. But he says, I need your consciousness with me now. And I was looking at him and I was like, I wasn't paying attention to anything else. And he's like, no. Like, I need your consciousness. Mm-hmm. And then I could feel myself go like, okay.
Yeah.
And then he goes, thanks. Like the minute I felt that, like the instant I felt that shift, like he was just like, thank you. And I was like, oh, Like there's a level of something that you can see, whereas like if you had a camera, you would have not noticed a fucking thing in my body. I was looking at him the same way. Maybe there was some subtle thing, but that was the first time there was really approaching mystical. I mean, that where it was like, oh, he noticed when I shifted something on like a spiritual level. I opened something deeper that was beyond anything that was observational. And that was cool for me to recognize too. And so it's like, it's almost like you're still tracking, but there's just another octave or another dimension that you're tracking in.
Yes. And the unseen, the unseen becomes, it normalizes as you start to become more aware of those feelings in those places. I guess it does start to go into the realms of woo, but it's very normal in a lot of ways. It becomes
normal.
Yeah.
Once you've experienced it, it becomes normal.
You spend a lot of time in ceremonies, it becomes normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just becomes, this is the other realm that a lot of people haven't been to, but we've been to it, and it's normal, and it has its own telltale signs. It's a feeling. It's not something you see with your five senses, that it's something that you just feel. You feel the opening or you feel the closing, just like your shaman could feel when you had doubt, or could feel when you were looking at him, or could feel all of these different aspects.
Yeah, and then, if you go to like Otto Schramm at MIT, who's building on, some of the original management consulting books, and, what he has arrived at is presencing, and one of the primary things that they're talking about is leading from the emergent future. So it's like, it's woo, but people are starting to really understand, deeply within the structures, that leading from the emergent future, it's like, I can feel what wants to happen. We have a sense of where this wants to go. Reinventing organizations, like high levels of how people run companies are now. It's not, we set a goal and a strategy, we go. It's like, the company is alive. It's an energy field, and we are listening as trackers for what it is asking for to continue to evolve. And so I just think this is a very natural evolution in some ways.
Damn, that's a really important thing for anybody running a company or starting a company, is like continuing that tracking process through an organization like it's an organism, because it is.
It's an energy field.
It's an energy field. It has a collective purpose. Like any organism itself is an organization of cells, of specialties, of organs that are all working towards creating one organism. Same with a company, same with a school, same with any kind of group gathering that you're getting. It becomes an organism. It becomes an energy.
And it's like, in a ceremony, it's like, here's my presence, here's your presence. So we have our individual presences, and then we create an energetic together. And then sometimes you'll add in some intelligences, our external intelligences into that space via substances. And then the ceremony is what you follow, that shared intelligence. You follow it. Same thing in businesses. And I think it's interesting that people are arriving at the idea that the highest levels of this thing are not to run it, but to let the track pull you, to let it start to pull you towards it.
Yeah, great wisdom there. Let's cut into talking about some of the really challenging experiences, because you had some stories from guests who had challenging experiences that ultimately became their most catalyzing, transformative experiences. But I promised people I'd go back to your croc bite, and I promised people I'd go back to some of these things in your life. So talk about how some of the challenging, traumatizing experiences like the croc bite, or like some of these things, how you look at these things now.
I look at all of the things that happen to me now as initiations. They at the time they froze me, but as I healed, they became the gifts of the medicine. When I was, I would say that there were two major things that stacked on top of each other, and this actually goes back to something we were talking about earlier. When I was 18, my family was physically attacked in Johannesburg at a time when South Africa had a lot of violent crime. And it was about a 4.5-hour ordeal. I saw my sister and my mother tied up on the ground around me. We were surrounded by men with guns who were threatening to kill us, who were clearly not, in a good state themselves. And I woke up to a gun at my head. And so I remember
Because you were knocked unconscious?
No, I was asleep when this whole thing started.
okay.
So I woke up to gunpoint.
So it was like home invasion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my sister sitting on top of me, and she was squeezing me. She was saying, "Be cool, be cool, be cool." And I woke up and I was surrounded by these guys, and I just felt like the most insane adrenaline go through my body, and it took me a long time to get that shake out of my body. And there was almost like I can't ever describe the quality of that fear. The like, I've been afraid, I've been charged by lions, but that fear was on a totally different level. And it was fear for, the people I loved around me. But what was interesting about it, going back to an earlier point, is during that weird, terrifying experience, I couldn't read the body language. I didn't know what these guys were going to do. It wasn't honest. We're going to kill you, we're not going to kill you, I couldn't.
They probably didn't know themselves.
Yeah, I couldn't, it was not honest in the way that an animal is honest. And I remember like really feeling that. So that happened. And then about a year after that, I was down at the river, and I'd taken some folks down there who were visiting, and there was clear water running over sand. And I was with a tracker by the name of Solium Mhlongo, and he had crossed the river at a shallow point, and he was on the far bank, and I was on the near bank. And a tree had fallen out of the bank, and it had created a sort of a little hollow. And as I sat down in the water, and I assessed the situation, and I thought, the water is shallow here, I'll be fine. I can see everywhere. And if you've ever seen a crocodile go underwater, it sinks, and then you can see it, and then within like 2 inches, you can't see it. I thought it's shallow enough that I could see, but he just had that little extra 2 inches on me. And my legs were dangling in the water, and the people were around me, and the croc came out and grabbed me by the right leg and pulled me. And as I started to go into the water, I just remember throwing my arm up, and by total chance caught a branch above my head, and the branch like stuck. And the croc started to shake me. I started to scream at the people next to me, "Get away from the water, get away from the water." Bit me a second time.
Into a roll, or did it?
It was just shaking and trying to pull.
Yeah.
Went to bite a second time, and my foot went down its throat, and it spat me out. I pulled myself up into the tree.
You gagged it.
I gagged it. This little pin down here. So I pulled myself up into the tree, and I remember coming out of the water and looking over my shoulder and seeing my leg from the knee down just absolutely mangled. And I also remember having an image of myself from like outside myself coming out the water. I got sort of across onto the bank, and I was thinking to myself, a croc, if he thinks he can get you, he'll try and get you a second time. And right at that point, my tracker, Solly, started coming towards me, and he was wading through shallow water. And then he got to the deep section of the channel, and he could see me lying on the bank with a mangled leg, and he knew that in the water between him and I was a crocodile. And he just came straight into the water. Boom. Waded in up to about his waist, came through, got me, grabbed me, and he dragged me up onto the bank. And up onto the bank, I had a look at it again, and I said to myself, I'm never going to look at that again. It was just horrific to look at. And then this voice started ringing in my head. It was my uncle's voice from when I was a kid. My uncle used to drop me in the river, and you get washed down the rapid, and then he would pull you out. And on one occasion, he had left me, and I got washed away. And so by the time he had pulled me out, I was like a shocked, 8-year-old. And he said to me, "Buddy, when you panic, your brain turns to sponge. Never panic in the bush." It's probably a good motto for life, right?
Yeah.
But sitting up there on the bank, I heard his voice, "Your brain will turn to sponge if you panic." So I started to calm myself down. My tracker gave me a shirt, wrapped the shirt around my leg, got the people together, calmed them down. Did my own first aid, called in a medivac, and managed to get myself out of there. But it was a very strange experience having another creature try and ingest you, and which is, I guess, a rare one in this life. And then also the difference between, there was so much blood being lost. Eventually I put a big blanket around it, and I had my foot up on the dashboard, and the blood was pouring out. And I distinctly remember thinking that my concept of you're gonna die one day, and I think I'm dying, that day has arrived. I remember things collapsing a little bit between the concept of dying and thinking it could be happening now if I lose enough blood. So that, that was that one. And those two experiences were stacked pretty much on the back of each other. Then that court case we spoke about. And so it was a fair amount to integrate for a 19-year-old.
So it seems like with the Croc encounter, there was the proximity to death, which is a great teacher, right?
Yes.
Like it allows you, gives you some idea of the preciousness and the ephemeral nature of life, and a lot of like beautiful lessons that
mortality
come from that.
checks.
Yeah, those
run
mortality
into
checks.
your mortality early on in your life.
Yeah, it's like the memento mori stoic saying, like, remember that you're going to die. Well, when you come that close, it's hard to forget, and you have a permanent reminder on your leg.
Yeah.
If you ever think that you're invincible and invulnerable and immortal and you're never going to die.
And I'm very difficult to track.
Yeah.
Because I have one foot that goes forward and one that just books off to the right. Where the hell's
he
this guy going? Should become like a metaphor for my whole life. But, going back to what you're just saying, one of the other things, like that early mortality check in your life, like really ramps up that desire to like live. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that, as you're saying, is just coming to me, when I started getting mentored in my early 20s, I sat in so many groups with people in their 50s and 60s. And it was a phenomenal thing, and it's a lost thing in this life to sit with people of different generations and actually see what they're carrying, see what they're holding, and to see that some people at 50 and 60 were realizing that they had never gone for the thing that called them, and the regret, and the willingness and the courage it was taking to start at that phase of life.
Would you say that was the top regret, that they'd never gone to the thing that called them?
The feeling that I got, there was grief, there was loss, but those were almost clean, they were clean. They were part of life in some ways. The thing that hurt much more to me, and the thing that had really sucked the life out of someone, was the feeling that they had known that there was something for them, and they had never given themselves the space to pursue it. That seemed to etch a depth of regret that was not healable through the support of the village. If someone had lost and was grieving, to be in a group and to have that held, you could feel the cleanness of the healing. But the regret for having known and not been willing or not been able, through whatever it was at the time, that really sat in people. And it was beautiful to see. And obviously there's no judgment. And it was time to start right then at 75. It was never too late. But it spurned something in me to like try and live this thing called life as best as possible, and to take the shot at failing, And as I said to you, like once this path emerged to me, it was 10 years of flailing around, wanting to be involved in the restoration movement, wanting to be a healer, having some safer options, but wanting to go for a life that felt like more mine. And, no one really wants to, you're not ready to be a healer, and people are not super open to you as a guide in life when you're 25, rightly so in some ways. But so there was years of like feeling called and not knowing how, that I had to sit through. But having these experiences was like, I'm going to keep going for this. I know that my path is to track, my path is to ceremony, my path is to restore, my path is to guide. And so somehow these things will come together in some way.
Yeah. I want to dive into something that we touched on yesterday, which is, I think both of us are deeply committed to the transformation of consciousness, which will lead ultimately to the transformation of the earth, because the humans, as the ones that know how to live out of accord with nature, whose minds can allow them to do any variety of thing. It's the greatest gift and the greatest curse of humanity. It is the actual biblical story of being cast out of the garden, where we have eaten from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, which is really the tree of the mind being able to become self-aware and make choices that are out of that. So to actually heal that is the necessity to healing the planet to a certain degree. But what's interesting is to then think about like how that plays out. So I think I've always thought like the upstream thing is consciousness, change consciousness. But I think a lot of people have some misconceptions about privatization and the privatization efforts of conservation versus you just, leave it up to the right government and the government does it. And so, you have some direct experience with restoring land and running the Landalusi property in that way. And we were talking about that. So if you could kind of share your thoughts on how like the privatization effort could actually be productive to the preservation of our resources.
Yeah, and if I may, I'll start a little bit upstream because I think that the restoration movement occurs in a kind of infinity loop. We have to restore our relationship with wild places and restore wild places. When we do that, we become well again as the people, And the other side of the loop is we have to heal as people. And as we heal and rediscover that it's not more we're looking for, it's more of what we really want. As we start to heal ourselves, we become a part of the opportunity to reconnect and restore nature. So there's this loop that happens. The restoration of the planet will come out of a shift in human consciousness. Well, one of the things that I'm seeing and I'm saying is that to be a tracker of your unique gifts, of your medicine in the world, is a kind of activism. Because in my experience, people who do the work of going inward and finding their track, people who touch that place, there's a few characteristics that start to emerge. One is when they touch that, a desire for simplicity seems to come online. They want to simplify their life. There's a natural inclination to return to nature and connect with nature. They become interested in experience over stuff, over consumption. They want to create rather than consume. There's a natural pull towards service that starts to emerge. And all of that, they stop fighting the revolution, they stop fighting the system, and they just abandon the system into a different way of living. And then their life becomes a kind of marker. That's their life, just by living it, without trying to promote any kind of activism to anyone. They live differently. And people say, well, if they are living like that, then it means it's possible to live differently. And so what I say towards the end of the book is that the tracker finds a different way of living. And what we need right now more than anything is different models for living. So that's where the inner work will come from. And a lot of people touching that naturally start to go back to nature. The second side of it is, I think what we are looking for is a psychology of restoration to wash over the world and to touch people and to awaken people to what is important again, so that people all over start reaching out to nature at every level of society, from the billionaires who start to preserve huge tracts of mountain ranges and forests, to people who start understanding that the creation of a garden on their small veranda of their apartment is connecting them back with nature. But inside of the mindset of returning to our relationship with nature, I think there's a tremendous opportunity and a physical opportunity. So those two things together are where it's going to pivot. We right now, I think I used the example last night, we're still buying sports teams and Picassos. And I'm interested in when people start to realize that the art that we really want, where we really want to spend our money is towards restoring. And I think that the rallying cry is to say, wherever you are, whoever you are, let's all adopt the mindset that we are the generation of restorers. We are the ones who have to start putting this thing back together. And I see like a groundswell movement of people talking about it. Already it's probably the largest, as Paul Hawkins says, unnamed social movement in history, this desire in people to reconnect. But I think we have to start saying it more overtly. Let us be the generation of restorers. Let's take up that mantle. At any level, whoever you are, if you are without mission, your mission is to find your medicine and begin to restore. That is what I believe is being asked of us now.
It seems like a lot of people can get caught up in the politics of it, and then I bet there's a lot of people who argue for climate change and argue against people who are opposing climate change and blah, 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 but have never planted a single plant in their backyard or in their house or anything like that. Like, Well, do both if you want. If you feel called to this, constant cycle of political nonsense, do that. But maybe plant some stuff too. Maybe like preserve some acres too, if you can. I mean, like start doing some real things.
I think policy is probably important, but I don't think we can rely on the leadership anywhere in this current structure to take us where we need to go. This is going to be a movement of born out of individual isolation towards a collective individual longing for something different. And the reason it's the tracker is that part of the challenge that we're facing is that there are no models. You might want to join a movement. Well, guess what? There's no movement to join. You have to make it. And so what I see is that what we're doing as trackers, as wayfinders, as navigators into this thing is we are reaching for the as yet unimagined, and we're trying to pull a new way into form by living it. We're reaching for there's no model for it. Someone asked me a little while ago, how did you get your job? I would like to get a job like that. You can't get this job. You have to make this up. That's really the point.
Yeah.
You will not look into the structures and find what you're looking for. You will reach for a different way yourself, and we reaching together is what I want to give my time to. And there are amazing restoration projects in the world, physical restoration projects. I think we need to expand them. And I may be totally out there on this one, but I think that the one thing that all of the algorithms do not account for is collective awakening. If we can kick the rudder on this thing into a big group awakening, many people coming into simplicity and the feeling of we have enough, stop wanting stuff. I think we can literally reflect a different world into form.
And people, then there's already theories that account for that, like the tipping point theories, these things where things do not go in, they have hyperbolic curves, where like something hits and then instead of it going in this gradual line where it's just like, plodding along at 2% growth, all of a sudden it's 2%, 2%, 30%, 50%, like it just ramps up when it just hits this tipping point. And I think that's possible for collective consciousness.
Did I ever tell you about the bees try to kill me?
No.
So I became super interested in bees, as one does.
Some
do. Well, in South Africa, there's this beautiful thing. There's this bird called the honey guide. The honey guide will lead you to hives. And so when you follow a honey guide, you're in touch with this ancient thing, a bird that will come to you and lead you to a beehive. Then there's the honey badger, which just as a spirit animal is just amazing, just running around looking for a fight. Get bitten by a cobra, die for 30 minutes, forget you died, get up and start like operating again. So there's a whole thing around bees. And then I started looking at bees and the way that they work, inside of this collective and which is really interesting. Well, I'll get to that. And so I wanted to go and understand bees from the inside. So I decided I would get into beekeeping. And I wanted to go and like work with the hive. This is African bees, wild African bees. So I went to this
they
local,
call them killer bees?
Killer bees, yeah. so I go to this local beekeeper. Meantime, there's a couple who had come to stay at the lodge. And at that time, the Ebola thing was happening in North Africa. So they had been writing to me saying, we want to come, but we're terrified of Ebola. And I was writing back to them saying, listen, Ebola is thousands of miles away. There's no Ebola in Southern Africa. You're good to come. And we had been backwards and forwards. Eventually, they had decided to come. So they came on safari. And I go to the local beekeeper, this guy called Simon Sambo. And I say to him, Simon, can you show me beekeeping? He says, he's got this beautiful voice. He says, I can, but I have to tell you, I was not formally trained. I'm like, no, but you look after the bees. He's like, yeah, I have a few hives. I will take you. So we go out, and I'm just like wearing like gym gear. And he opens this box, and he gives me a suit. And when I put it on, the suit is a bit short for me. So like this rang a bit of a bell. I was like, Simon, it's a bit short. He says, don't worry, you can borrow my socks. So he takes his socks off, and he gives me his socks. And now we're in like our beekeeping suits, and we start trudging towards the bees. Now, as you approach the bees, it's like they can sense your intention on them from a long way away. They understand that unspoken language. They can feel energy on them. So as you get close to the hive, you hear, it's like someone's like turning up the volume. And then he got his crowbar out and he jacked the lid off this thing. And 70,000 of the most enraged bees came out of that. And I was covered in a collective energy of profound hatred, and you should not have fucked with us. And it like shimmers around you. It went dark. They like started landing on the visor. And I just felt like, this is worse than a lion charge, like the feeling of this energy around me. And they're revving at like high voltage. So I said to him, Simon, these bees are, he says, don't worry, they will calm down. Meantime, he hasn't brought the smoker with him because I said to him, don't we smoke them? He said, no, it makes them afraid. A fire is coming. So now they are going ballistic. And then one found the weakness on my sock and it stung me. And I remember seeing this black like cloud that was hovering over me. Stop. And then as one, they went to my ankles. And they started to sting me outrageously. So I started saying, Simon, they're stinging me. Simon, they're stinging me. What must I do? What must I do? It's fucking death all around. And then, Simon, they're stinging me. He says, maybe move away. So I start like moving away and they stay with you. We get out into the clearing and I'm screaming at him, Simon, they're stinging me. He says, don't worry, I will help you. And he breaks a branch and he starts beating me with a branch. Bah, bah. So I'm standing in a clearing in the beekeeping suit, just getting lashed by a beekeeper, still getting stung. I said, Simon, they're still stinging me. He says, wait, I will get the smoker. So he runs off. Now he gets the smoker and he starts getting elephant dung and trying to get it going. Then he comes over to me and he blasts me with the smoker. And the first like blast hit me in the face. So I got a deep inhale of elephant dung smoke. Now my lungs are burning and I think, well, I'm dying. I'm like the venom is starting to like cause a tightness in my lungs. And I'm still screaming and I say, Simon, they're going to kill me. They're all around me, getting stung hundreds of times through the sock. There's like an anklet of bees on me. He says, I don't know what to do. Run for your life. So I start running in the beekeeping suit with him next to me. And we're just running through the bush. I say, where must I run? He says, run to the Land Rover. We will drive away from them. So we run to the Land Rover and in our beekeeping suits, we get in and we start driving away. And we're powering away and we come around the corner, both of us screaming, they're going to kill us. And in the vehicle coming in the other direction are the couple who were afraid of Ebola. And they check these two dudes screaming in like hazmat suits, like just drive past them. It was like the weirdest experience. But in the beehive, and what I got out of it was like, oh, you want to learn about the power of the collective? Like, this is the power of the collective. You want to understand the ferocity of what can happen when the collective is united? Try this out. And inside of the hive, every bee reacts to local stimuli. They do what they know to do. And every bee stays attuned to what they know to do. And as enough bees do that, the collective algorithm fires. And suddenly, as one, out of individuals doing what they truly know to do, they move as one, and the whole thing shifts. And so I have to believe that is the model. Every individual getting under the patterned response of modern life into the track of your life, the integrity, attend to what you know to do. And when enough of us can do that, we'll fire the algorithm. And if the bees are anything to go by, that can produce, a terrifying kind of intensity of transformation.
Well, let's fucking go. Let's do this.
Let's do it. I think we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Collectively. I mean, that's what a great story and what a great metaphor to use, because you just reflect that in the opposite thing instead of the ferocity and anger that you've seen in like the French Revolution or seen in these other collective movements with hatred as fuel. What if it's love? And what if it's that desire
that same intensity
to get pulled towards your passion and your purpose in the service of others, and bring that same ferocity that the bees had to hate and turn that into love, which is an even more powerful force.
And to me, even inside of that, while it was terrifying for me, that was love for them. Yeah. They were acting in the most loving way to their collective, Yeah. And they gave me such a lesson. And I lay on my bed for 3 weeks with my feet in ice buckets. But
Some lessons come with a steeper cost than others.
Come with a bit of a sting.
I think it was pretty much worth it for this story, actually. So I'm grateful for it.
It's true. You know that whole thing, like nothing bad ever happened to a writer.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, Boyd, thank you for everything, man. Thanks for coming out here to Austin. Thanks for writing this book. Everybody, it's called The Lion Tracker's Guide to Life. I really highly recommend anybody listen to it on Audible, too, because there are going to be parts you're going to want to take notes, but you're just such a good storyteller, man. It's great to hear you narrate it and do all the sounds and tell all the stories. It's beautiful, man.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great to be here and be with the Austin community. It feels really good.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, my brother. Take care, everybody. Peace. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe. Also, share with any friend that you think might benefit from it. And lastly, go to aubreymarcus.com, sign up for my newsletter diary, and you won't miss a thing.